did not expect to talk to you today about how to recession-proof your startup. We had a different topic planned for today. And then starting on Friday, we scratched that. And shout out to Phoebe, who's on the call. As always, shout out to other folks at FreeWill. We spent the whole weekend doing a ton of research because a lot of things happened in the last 6 days in particular. A lot of things happened in the last 24 hours. So we went to work. So first, let me just ask some forgiveness in case there are typos or formatting errors, because this was very last minute. There was a ton of sort of college test level cramming to make sure that we were totally up to date here. So shout out Phoebe and others as well. Today's topic is how to recession proof your nonprofit. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping notes. Recordings and the slides will be sent to you after the session. If someone asks about this in the chat, please just let them know that this will be true. Two, this event is approved for CFRE credits. How do you get those? Well, at the end of the session, complete a survey to confirm attendance. You can add questions in the chat at any point or in the Q&A. We are going to do our best to stay on top of those. We will not get to all of them. Some of you don't always know how many people are here. We're approaching 1,000. Soon we will be over 1,000. So, we're not going to get to all your questions. Please forgive us in advance. I am going to take one moment to take my AirPods out because it sounds like they are dying on me. So someone give me a yes if you can hear me in the chat. Perfect. Thank you so much. And we will get rolling. All right, here's the intros. Here's the agenda. We're going to talk about the current moment. We're going to actually walk through the worst case scenario because it's actually really helpful to be like, okay, if this gets as bad as can be, what is it going to look like? Then we're going to talk about some steps for resilient 2025. I think we have 7, maybe we have 8. We're going to dive in there. We're going to talk through, okay, practically, what do we do? Because there's actually some good news in all of this. There's also some bad news in all of this, but we're going to get through it together, both this year and this next hour. And so we'll be good. Mindy says the audio is low now. Can other folks hear me? Yes, great. All right, Mindy, turn your volume up if you don't mind. Sound a little muffled. Let's try a different set of AirPods. Okay, how's this? Someone give me one more yes. Better, perfect, great. Thank you, everybody. We are, as I mentioned, we're going to get through this together, whether it is recession or AirPods running out of batteries. Whatever we do, we're gonna figure it out. So quick intros. My name is Patrick. This is what I look like with a very large beard, which I don't have now. My wonderful co-founder, Jenny. I am currently in Brooklyn, the largest borough of New York City. Jenny is all the way out in Seattle. We are lucky to be part of FreeWill, which is the #1 estate planning and plan giving solution in the United States, trusted by more than 2,000 leading nonprofits, including the American Red Cross, the American Heart Association, Amnesty International, Susan G. Komen, the United Way, lots of others as well, featured in things like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. For you young people, those are newspapers. Also featured in this month's Chronicle Philanthropy, which is very cool. FreeWill team has generated more than $12 billion raised for nonprofits to date. Nearly 2,000 partners and over 4 centuries, probably going on 6 at this point, of combined fundraising experience and expertise. Oh, also, big shout out to our people team and our managers and our other execs. This past week, we were named 2025 Most Loved Workplaces for Diversity by the Best Practice Institute. So shout out to us. So great job to the team. That is obviously not my doing. It is a wide variety of managers, people team, other execs, Jenny, etc. So very exciting. Pam says featured where this month? Featured in the cover story of the Chronicle Philanthropy. So check that out. Okay, we love you. And one of our various ways of saying that is sending gifts every webinar. And we're reading some of our favorite books. So this is a book we figured, hey, let's find a little bit of peace in between the chaos. There's a great author named Oliver Burkeman. If I recall correctly, he wrote, yes, it's right there on the bottom of the book. He wrote a great book called 4,000 Weeks, which really sort of topped the charts and really sort of thoughtfulness around how to plan one's life. He wrote another book pictured here called Meditation for Mortals. Some of you will have read this, but give it a shot. So make a note in the survey if you'd like to get if you'd like a copy, and we will let you know shortly after. Simone says she loves 4,000 Weeks. Also a great book. Feel free to buy that at your local independent bookstore. All right, let's talk about your week. Okay, so it has been a week. People are feeling good. I will just note that a lot of these survey responses came in on Thursday, so a little bit more positive. And then also a lot of fear around hitting our goals this year. So we're basically down to 3.25 out of 5 in terms of confidence, which is actually pretty middle level confidence. It's not super low, it's not super high, but it is lower than it's been. So we're going to talk a lot about understanding the likelihood of hitting your goals and what you might also like to do. So just a quick note on the books here. The way you would get a book is at the end of the session, you will fill out a survey, include your address as well. So please just note that as well. Okay, so what the heck just happened in the past week? We are ready. I hope you're ready to deep dive with me, but it has been a wild week. So as long promised, the Trump administration announced a series of sizable tariffs on Wednesday, April 2nd, only 6 days ago, a date the Trump administration called Liberation Day. The exact details were known to almost no one outside a small circle until they were made public at 4 p.m. Policies included what's called a universal tariff, which means 10% on all imported goods from every country outside the United States, effective immediately. It also included country-specific tariffs, additional tariffs on approximately 60 countries, calculated based on perceived trade imbalances and barriers. Some notable examples included China, 34%, potentially going up even higher. European Union, 20%. Japan, 24%. Vietnam, 46%. These come into force tomorrow, April 9th, right? So big, big news. Just to give you a sense here, this is the average weighted tariff rate. So of all the goods coming in the country, what is the average tariff on it? Well, once these go into effect, it will be 22.5%. Now let's take that, let's go all the way back. When's the last time it was that high? Looks like 1909, before most of you, if not all of you, were born, before most of your parents were born, before most of your grandparents were born, right? You can see that in the 1870s, we had relatively high tariffs. Interesting historical fact here. But for the last 120 years, we have had very low tariffs comparatively. And so we're back all the way up. Really interesting stuff there. So what happened? Well, even though President Trump has been talking about tariffs since the 80s, campaigned heavily on tariffs, and spoke about them frequently since Election Day, the size and scope of these policies still stunned many, leading to a massive sell-off in the United States stock market. Now, world markets were similarly affected as well. So those of you outside the US, I'm sure you saw this as well. On Thursday, the S&P 500, which is an index of the top 500 stocks in the US, roughly, was down 5% on Thursday and 6% on Friday, combining to lose 11% of its value in just 2 days. 11%, is that a lot? Is that a little? Well, in terms of total value lost, meaning all the money, not the percentage, all the money, it was the worst 2-day slide in stock market history since the creation of the United States. More than $5 trillion was lost in just 48 hours. You'll hear this described as a correction. A correction is defined as a decline of at least 10%, but less than 20% from a recent peak. One stock index, the NASDAQ, is already in what's called bear market territory, which is more than a 20% drop since the most recent peak. The others are very close. We saw some positive movement in the stock market today. We haven't updated some of these slides as of an hour ago. You may even hear some describe this as a stock market crash, but a crash has no formal definition for the word. There's no numerical value the way there is a correction and a bear market. So that's up for debate. Let's put the stock market in perspective. So the stock market's down about 11% year to date, but it is up 0.3% for the past 12 months. So good to know. Keep a sort of mental note on that past 12 months. We'll come back to that later. It is up 27% since 2 years ago, and it's up 87% over the last 5 years. So you have some different trends here. It's now at an equal level to May 2024, but there had been a lot of growth since May, and then it's all disappeared. What else does the announcement mean? Well, tariffs are expected by most economists to meaningfully raise prices on a variety of goods. I think everyone knows what a tariff is, but basically a tariff is an amount that gets paid by the importer when it enters a country, the United States or something else. And then often that will get baked into the price paid by the consumer. Now, the consumer often doesn't pay all of it. The consumer pays some of it. The importer pays some of it. But you generally see prices rise on a variety of goods. Now, there's something called the Budget Lab at Yale University, which is an economics lab. And according to them, we have the highest average tariff since 1909, as I showed you already. Fresh produce prices will go up by about 4%. Apparel will go up by 17%. We saw Vietnam, which is a big apparel exporter, see big tariffs, as is China. In the price level from all 2025 tariffs rises by 2.3%, meaning all prices across the board, on average in the short run, prices go up by 2.3%. The equivalent of an average per household consumer loss of about $4,000 in 2024. At the lowest end of the income distribution, it will be $1,700. What we know is that folks who are lower income tend to buy more things that are tariffed under these conditions. You can read a lot more in the link at the Budget Lab if you are an economics nerd and want to nerd out on this a little bit. But suffice to say that for the most part, things will get more expensive. So what does that mean? If things get more expensive, your average households, meaning your middle class households, your lower middle class households, and these are your small dollar donors, are hit with what we think of as a triple whammy. Three things are happening at the same time. There is a reduction in savings and investments, right? I look at my 401k, it's down. I look at my other investments, they're down. The second thing is we have increased costs on weekly and monthly expenses. So things that were imported from other countries, well, now they cost more, right? And in some cases, things that are produced in the United States raise their prices because the new market price for these things has gone up a bit. There's also increased uncertainty in the job market if we are potentially entering a recession. So these three things are hitting your small donors hard. Now, it's a little scary time, but we're just going to we want to make sure we get in the mindset of our donors as well. Kate says, what's the name of that budget website? It's the Yale Budget Lab. So they have a bunch of interesting publications you can check out as well. So boy, it's been a crazy week. What happens next? Well, the short answer is that nobody knows for certain, but there are two major things to watch. The first is, what is the country by country response? Do they reduce their tariffs, hoping the US reduces their tariffs? Do they increase their tariffs to try to gain leverage? So far, Europe, China, and others are announcing retaliatory measures aimed at the United States, raising fears globally of an all-out trade war. Vietnam, in contrast, is offering to eliminate all tariffs on US imports if the same is done for them. And you have all of these both public pronouncements and back-channel discussions as well. Now, one of the things is that this isn't necessarily a conciliatory approach by the United States, you might have noticed. And so voters in many countries are demanding their leaders take a more aggressive approach. They don't want to be pushed around. You're seeing this in Canada. So in Canada, the Liberal Party, those of you in Canada know this, was in real trouble. And then we've got a little bit of harsh rhetoric towards Canada from the Trump administration. And suddenly the folks that were seen as more willing to stand up to Trump are gaining in the polls, right? And so you see that in Germany, the Christian Democrats, which sounds like a far right-wing party, but is actually a centrist party, has risen in the polls as being a little bit more in opposition to Trump. So interesting to see that as well. So that's one thing we're watching. Second thing we're watching is what happens within the White House and within the Republican Party. So Elon Musk is in a public feud already with White House advisor Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro is seen as the architect of the tariffs. Several Republicans in the Senate have already publicly broken with the president over tariffs, and if markets continue to slide, others may join them. There's a new bill advancing in the Senate that says actually, potentially, Congress has control over all tariffs. 7 US senators in the Republican Party have signed on so far. Now, it has a relatively low chance of getting passed in the Senate. It has a lower chance of getting passed in the House, and it would almost certainly be vetoed by this White House. And yet, maybe there's some world where that becomes a 2/3 majority. In any case, it ends up putting pressure on the White House. This is really one of the first big intra-party fissures we've seen, along with the higher end visas for skilled workers that we saw. So what's going to happen next? Well, JP Morgan, pictured here right is the original JP Morgan. We're talking about the bank here, is now predicting a recession in 2025, giving 60% odds of that happening. That is why we're holding this session, to make sure that you are ready if that happens. What is a recession? Again, it's a technical term. In the US, a recession is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, right? Typically, our economy tends to grow over time, and 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. The projection is that that happens in the back half of this year. JP Morgan's chief economist, Michael Feroli, predicts the US unemployment to rise to 5.3%, up from 4.2 in March. But for context, in 2009, at the nadir of the 2008 crash, unemployment was 10%. So we're still a pretty big gap from that, but not necessarily good news. All right, so that's what's happening in the world. What's the worst case for charitable giving? What might we expect here? Well, we did a lot of homework over the last week, and we're going to give you a little bit of a jog down history lane, if you don't mind. There have been 3 recessions this millennium: 2020, especially around the dawn of COVID, 2008, known as the Great Recession, and 2001, which was the dot-com crash, followed shortly thereafter by September 11th attacks, which rattled markets across the world, as well as obviously a bunch of other bad things happening. The COVID recession was very brief. It was one of the shortest on record. It was relatively anomalous, had a lot of different factors, and charitable giving actually went up that year. So we're not going to look at that so much. The 2001 recession was mild, as recessions go. So instead, we're going to focus on 2008 and 2009 to understand the worst case scenario for giving. And let's dive in here so we can actually be prepared for history and potentially repeat itself, right? Ed says these are recessions in the United States. That is correct. So we're focusing on US recessions. Thank you. You can see here, generally the yellow lines are when we're in recession. You see this in early 90s, in the early 2000s, in around 2008, and then again, briefly in COVID. So let's dive in here. Let's just go back. So some of you were fully fledged adults. Some of you were working heavily. You were deeply involved in this. You remember it like it was yesterday. A lot of you were not, right? So a lot of you weren't in the working world or weren't really thinking about finances in 2008. So let's just sort of take a quick step back. This is 2008, by the way, is 17 years ago, which feels crazy. 17 years ago. I guess I am old as well at this point. So in mid-2008, George W. Bush was still president. This is the second George Bush, of course. Facebook had just overtaken MySpace in terms of monthly users. The iPhone was just beginning to catch on, having been introduced in 2007. Beijing was hosting the Summer Olympics. Twilight, the movie, was about to set off a global phenomenon. Iron Man hit theaters in May, kicking off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? So that's 2008, different time. Nico says they were in elementary school, did not know anything about it. So thanks. Thank you, Iron Man, for causing all these problems, right? So then what happened in 2008 from the economic standpoint? Well, in March, Bear Stearns nearly collapses and is sold to JP Morgan Chase in a Fed-backed deal. This is an early warning sign, but it doesn't yet cause the crash. In September of 2008, on September 15th, Lehman Brothers files for bankruptcy, triggering panic across global markets. In September and October, credit markets freeze. Major bailouts begin, including AIG, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. In October 2008, global stock markets crash. The Dow Jones falls nearly 1,900 points in a single week. Congress passes the $700 billion TARP bailout to stabilize the banking system. This was much criticized later. In late 2008 and early 2009, we saw massive job losses across industries and unemployment climbed rapidly. In this period, the Dow Jones, which is one of the leading indicators of stock market, lost 50% of its value from peak to trough, right? This was rough. It was rough. So what happened to giving, right? And we could go a lot more into the causes of it, about credit default swaps and the housing crisis and the housing bubble and subprime mortgages, and we'll do all that a different day. So suffice to say, right, trust the people who are around, mostly more than me, that it was bad. It was bad. So what happened to giving in this period, which is the most challenging economic climate of the last 30 years? Well, in 2008, total giving fell 7% in inflation-adjusted dollars, from 373 billion to 349 billion. 2009, giving declined an additional 6.2% to 328 billion. Now, this is not good, but it's also not terrible. It's the largest two-year drop in giving in over 40 years, and it was only 13%. So it's sort of interesting to consider that actually giving is quite resilient. Now, if we look sector by sector, you see a lot of this drop in giving is actually giving into foundations. You can see this sort of, I don't know if folks have me at the top, but this third bar from the right, that's foundations. Huge drop in 08, big drop in 09. Look at human services. That's the third line from the left. 08, modest drop. 09 actually went up. Religion, drop in 08. 09, very small. Education, modest drops, right? Environment and animals, modest drops. Big drop in international affairs and public society benefits. Now, what are those? Those tend to be think tanks, and they tend to be advocacy organizations. Now, what's one interesting thing about 2008? Well, those of you that were around then recall it was also a presidential election. So you had a lot of giving. You know, if you're someone who really cares about civil liberties or really cares about tax policy or really cares about environmental policy, you may have actually been given to the presidential campaigns or Senate campaigns or gubernatorial campaigns in that exact time, right? So some of that was non-economic diversion, some of it was. Obviously, health hit hard. Arts and culture was probably one of the hardest hits as well. But you see this about a 5% drop, then about a 7% drop. So the message here is that it's actually not catastrophic. Excuse me. So let's talk about what my friend Ben, Ben is an old mentor of mine and an old boss of mine who has since become the chair of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin and actually just lost a race to be the chair of the National Democratic Party quite recently. Ben Wickler, folks know him. And one of the things that I really appreciate from Ben is that Ben talks about elections being within the margin of effort. And really, when we think about hitting our goals, there are some headwinds here, but hitting our goals is within the margin of effort here. So the lesson from 2008 and 2009 is that giving is quite resilient. In a period where the Dow Jones dropped 4.5 times more or 5 times more than it has this year, giving was only down 6% and 7% in 2 years, 13% total in 2 years. So one possible scenario here is that giving across the board is down 3 to 7% in 2025 if things don't get better, right? And it could get worse also. But remember, 7% is the max that it hit in 08 and 09 in terms of a yearly drop. And that was a much more catastrophic economic environment. So the fundamental question is, do you believe that a great fundraising team outperforms a mediocre fundraising team by at least 3% or 7%? And do you believe that a truly exceptional fundraising team outperforms a great team by at least 3 to 5%? Right? So if the answer there is yes, the view is that the role of the nonprofit fundraiser has never been more important than it is this year. Right? We look at that sector-wide trends. There are plenty of organizations that hit their goals in 2008 and 2009 because they were extra savvy. So is it harder to hit your goals this year than it would be otherwise, especially if the stock market continues to decline? Yes. Is it impossible? By no means. And so let's actually talk about some very practical steps here as well. A well-executed plan will still allow you to surpass your goals, but it is going to take some work. So 8 steps for a resilient 2025. First, remember we went back to inflation plus job insecurity plus lower savings. These are going to hit your small dollar donors the hardest. Middle and low income donors will be hit hardest by a possible recession and the cost increases. These are the folks most likely to face real pocket pressures with real rising costs. Plus, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is likely to be renewed in some fashion soon. This continues the policies of the last 8 years, which has been leading to a decline in small dollar giving, especially among cash giving. What we know is that when these policies are in place, 90% of Americans receive no tax benefits from cash donations. And it's actually more expensive to donate cash than it was in 2017 because there are no associated tax savings. So giving has actually gotten more expensive for a normal person giving $100 at a time. So what we want to do is look for ways to allocate resources away from small dollar cash giving into higher ROI avenues. And we'll talk about what those are in a moment. Step 2, all in on donor advised funds. There is currently likely $230 billion or more sitting in donor advised funds right now. Remember, this money can never be spent on anything at all but charitable giving to 501c3 organizations. It can't come back. It can't get spent on a yacht. It can't get spent on groceries. Donor advised funds did not exist at the same meaningful level during 2008, but they will be a boon to organizations who repeatedly market these gifts. So this money is pre-allocated. It's put in a fund. The donor has gotten some tax benefit. It's sitting there. It's ready to be given out if people are asking for it. Make sure these are on option on your donate page and include an ask in every fundraising email. Make sure to ask in every survey and every major donor conversation if someone has a donor advised funds. And if they do, treat them like a major donor, especially now. I was just on the phone about an hour ago with someone who works at a company that provides donor advised fund resources and software to lots of banks and financial advisors. What they told me is, and I totally agree, we had this long conversation, is if you are a charity and you know someone has given to you from a donor advised fund in the past, those names, that contact information is absolute gold. We know there's a lot more money sitting behind that initial gift. It is a great time to go talk to those folks. If you are a FreeWill partner, in the Smart Giving Suite, we have been surfacing data of folks who are giving to you vis-a-vis donor advised fund grants. Go talk to those people. These are going to be some of your lifeline here as well. Step 3, all in on private foundations as well. So one of the things that's bad for private foundations right now is their endowments are going to get a little bit smaller with the stock market hit, right? Because they're mostly in a variety of investments, some bonds, some stocks. But many foundations have already planned to increase their granting in the wake of federal funding reductions, right? They've already made this case for it. It is an ideal time to reach out to new private foundations if you haven't already. And many nonprofits are now using AI to speed up and improve their applications and win more funding. As a very brief aside, you should go check out grantassistant.ai if you haven't already. And the folks that are using it say things like this. As one of just 3 people in our organization and the only one fundraising, I can attest that Grant Assistant saves a ton of time. In our first month, we won a $30,000 grant generated by Grant Assistant. That's from Beth Zimmerman. So back to this. What's happening? You're seeing foundations, even before the stock market crash or dip, say, yes, we're going to amp up our game in 2025. The MacArthur Foundation, increasing grants by $150 million, raising their payout rates. Pivotal Ventures, launching a $250 million fund for women's health and human rights. Bloomberg Philanthropies, pledging to cover the US share of the UN climate budget. Freedom Together Foundation, doubling grant making to 10% of the endowment, right? Transit Center, spending an entire endowment down within 12 years. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, paying out its highest rate ever. Global Giving, launching emergency fundraising for grassroots organizations, and so on and so forth, right? So you're starting to see a really big component here. So make sure you're really amping up your game on private foundations. There's a lot of great opportunities out there. Please know this as well. Step 4, consider anchor points during a recession. This is extremely important. So when I'm asking you to give me money for my nonprofit, there are 3 potential anchor points that donors think about. 1, how much does it cost me? How much am I saving? And what impact am I having, right? These are the 3 different ways we're going to think about how much it is. The same, by the way, is true if I try to sell you a cup of coffee or sell you a pickup truck or whatever it may be. You want to stay away from the first one, and you want to help the donor focus on the second or third, ideally the third, or even better, both. So let's look at what that looks like. This, by the way, is always true. In good times, always true. In bad times, always true. But especially true now. So let's just do some examples. Can you give me $10,000 this year to the land trust? Well, what do you think about right now? $10,000, that's a lot of money. What else was I going to spend that $10,000 on? Ooh, that's tough. I don't know. That's $10,000. Did you know that by giving a gift of $10,000 in appreciated stock, You might be able to save more than $5,000 in taxes this year. Wow, that's a lot of savings on taxes. Wow, that gift is actually much cheaper than I thought. Right now, we're sort of getting out of the lens of the first one. Third, though, with a $10,000 gift of appreciated stock, you can help us finally open the path through the preserve. This will give thousands of families a chance to experience nature in a new way next year. Suddenly, this feels like a bargain. It feels like a steal because I'm anchoring on impact. A $10,000 gift suddenly helps thousands of families. Wow, yes, right? And you can tell the difference here. We're trying to be more savvy with our money. And so it's got to feel like a valuable use of the money. And especially if I can layer in some level of savings as well, right? Really, really helpful. Another anchor point. In tight times, we remind donors of their wealth. Now, this is a little bit counterintuitive, but it's extremely important. Asset gifts remind us of our wealth. There's a great experiment, a very famous one done in Cambridge. Some shoppers entering a marketplace were asked, what's in your wallet? Is it cash or credit cards? While others were asked, do you own stocks or bonds? The shoppers who were asked about stocks and bonds ended up spending 36% more at the market, right? Even in downturns, assets remind us of our wealth. So please keep doing this. Step 5, if you have a disastrous year, it is likely you made one of these 2 fatal mistakes. So please pay extra attention right now. Even if you don't want to pay attention to the rest of the session, there are 2 things that you can get wrong and that are actually quite common mistakes. And what we want to do is avoid them, like most of the savvy nonprofits who succeeded in past years. So 2 big mistakes. What are they? The first is to stop asking. Some of you feel like, oh, it's not a good time to make a request. It's not a good time to ask. You might feel less comfortable asking for money at this moment. That is understandable. And yet it is the only strategy that guarantees failure and puts your organization at risk. Plenty of donors will be willing and able to help, and they can always say no. It is okay if your donors say no. The key is the anchor points, right? And why this is needed now more than ever. So instead of making a recession a reason not to give, make it a reason, make it a reason to give, not a reason not to. So you might say, in this challenging time, our work is more important than ever, and here's why, right? Really important. The second fatal mistake is to stop asking for asset-based gifts. Now, we know from the research that organizations that raise asset-based gifts dramatically outperform the organizations that don't by enormous sums. So you might feel less comfortable asking for stock gifts at the moment. That's understandable. But in tighter economic times, it's important to highlight ways that donors can save more when they give, when they can have more impact for the least cost. And remember that stock gifts avoid capital gains and give a full income tax deduction. So it's actually much cheaper to give a stock than to give cash. Just as a reminder here, right? We already talked about this. Don't stocks have to have gone up to be worth giving? Yes, they do. That's a very important point. But remember, the S&P is still up 80% in the past 5 years. Apple is up 180%. Tesla's up 500%. If you're a liberal nonprofit and you find out a donor has Tesla stock, you might say, oh, do you want to give that to us? And we'll turn it into great impact, right? NVIDIA's up 1,400%, et cetera, et cetera. Almost every one of your major donors will have appreciated assets and will be looking for savvy giving opportunities. Keep in mind, a donor might say, oh, I think it's going to go up. You say, great. You can always rebuy the stock and you reset your cost basis. So we won't get into too much of that right now, but it's always a good idea to be giving appreciated assets as well. So remember that reminding people of their assets significantly increases their willingness to give. And remember that non-cash gifts are much larger than cash gifts from the same people. So reminding people they can give out of their assets gets you bigger non-cash gifts and bigger cash gifts because of mental anchor points. Here's a way that you can include asking for donor advised funds, stocks, gifts from your IRA, et cetera. In every email, you should do this. A woman emailed me last night and said, hey, look, I'm in a debate with my colleague. We're about to send out our spring fundraising email. Should I include this? I think yes. My colleague says no. And I told her, I said, you are exactly right? And please come to this session. I'm going to give you 2 slides on why you're exactly right. You can send them to your colleague later. But here is the information, right? We know that when we're asking for these gifts, we'll get larger gifts. We also know they help donors save money. People are looking to save money in moments like this. Okay, step 6, understand the inevitable future. So planned giving, which is gifts in a will or a trust or similar, is likely to be the only type of giving that is up across the nonprofit sector this year, as it was the only type of giving that was up in 2024. This is because we are entering the beginning of what we call the great wealth transfer. And mortality is more due to demographics than economics, right? So you have a lot of folks turning 80 years old this year or 80 years old next year, a lot of folks turning 79 this year in the baby boom population. Planned giving does not pause for good times or bad times. It just tends to be true. Tip, go read the cover story of the Chronicle Philanthropy this month, including how Susan G. Komen Foundations added $400 million in bequest expectancies in just a few years, right? When we look back at this decade, planned giving is going to be the most important story, even more than AI and even more than any economic dip we see here, right? It is predictable, it is growing. It is a catastrophic mistake to back off from this at this moment. And the reason is, when we go back and we do our homework in 2008, we find that many organizations credited planned giving as the funding source that supported their organization throughout the economic crisis. One vice president of advancement, higher ed, shared that planned giving saved us during that difficult time. The college's bequest program provided a steady and reliable income stream, allowing them to continue operations and sustain programs despite economic challenges. So very, very cool. Orion, I think I'm saying your name correctly, just secured 1.2 million last week in planned gifts. So if you can just join me in congratulating Orion in the chat. Michael says that his first planned gift happened in 2009. So pretty wild to see. Congrats, Orion. Congrats everybody here. I mean, this stuff really happens. Step 7, use AI for more personalized major giving, right? So we have to get better at our work. AI offers unprecedented opportunities for more thoughtful communications at a faster rate to reach more donors. You can visit our webinars page at this link. I'm not going to read it out. For previous webinars on AI, where we're going to outline 10 different ways you can use AI. We're not going to do that now in the next 3 minutes, but I'm just going to share this with you so you can go back and look. It's all even more important now than it was in the next few weeks, few webinars. We just did the webinar calendar coming up, but I don't have it top of mind. We'll be doing another deep dive on AI because this stuff is so important. And I mean, just as a quick aside here, I watch the AI news like a hawk because we think a lot of our role is helping to translate technological innovations into actual good for nonprofits. And this stuff is getting better so quickly. I mean, the image generation, the video generation, the text that is frankly better than I can write at this point. And I am a former professional fundraising writer, full-time writer. And I look at this stuff and I think this is really good. Not always better than me, but often better than me. From just a pure writing standpoint, we use it for strategy all the time internally. Friday, FreeWill is actually shutting down for 4 hours to do a full hackathon on basically using AI because we're trying to get our folks even sharper on it. So we think this is really cool. So more to come on this topic soon. And we have lots of thoughts here, but we're not going to spend all our time here. All right. Step 8, most important one. Look, history ebbs and flows. And this can be a stressful and scary time for nonprofit fundraisers. Some of you are even harder hit because you have federal funding that you thought you were going to get that you might not get. Some of you are under pressure from donors or from the administration. It can be a stressful and scary time. But it is also the time, right? The moments of challenge are when the sector, when the nonprofits, when the world needs folks in exactly your role the most, right? Exactly you, right? Not other people, you. And you can do this. We, the whole FreeWill team, the rest of the people here are here to help in any way we can, every step of the way. So please let us know if there are things that we can do, whether it's new training sessions, whether it's new tools, whether it's something else. And this is an achievable year. It's not the easiest year you're ever going to have, but it is certainly an achievable year. And we know that even in the worst economic conditions of the modern era in 2008 and 2009, only a 13% gap, which means that we know many charities surpassed their goals and grew in that moment, right? So there's steps to do. Things like donor advised funds were not really accessible to a fundraiser in 2008. It was not a good time for planned giving in 2008, and yet still we saw just this 8% drop. So I think you are going to be in good shape, but there are obviously steps to take. So let's summarize, and then we'll do a few minutes of questions, and then we will wrap up. So in summary, step one, look to reallocate resources. Resources don't just mean money, it means staff time, attention, and money away from small dollar cash gifts into higher ROI elements. Two, all in on donor advised funds. We talked about that at length. Three, all in on private foundations as well. These are two areas that are going to increase for you this year. Four, refocus anchor points of communication. Are we anchoring on impact? Are we anchoring on savings? Don't anchor on cost. This is very useful. Start to listen, by the way, to commercials over the next month or two, and you'll hear people repositioning, buying groceries, buying pickup trucks, buying something else as savings, as being smart with money. You'll see this as well because marketers know this, that these anchor points really matter. Five, avoid the two fatal mistakes we talked about. Keep asking for money. Keep asking for asset-based gifts. You will not regret it. It's okay to hear no once in a while. You will be better off. By the way, the way to be less scared about this is to tell people what they're going to get with that money, right? You're going to keep 3 kids in school who might drop out. You're going to keep this exhibit open for all these kids that might want to see it. The land trust is even more important as people are trying to find more outdoor, low-cost ways of spending time, right? All of these things really matter. 6, remember that demographics are destiny. The inevitable demographic wave is beginning. Stay focused on planned giving. It can save you in hard times, and it is critically important for your future. 7, use AI for increased personalization and efficiency. And then lastly, 8, keep calm. You can definitely do this. So that is our summary. There are a couple of other things we want to tell you, and then we're going to answer a couple of questions, and we will probably end about 8 minutes early here. First things first, thank you, Phoebe. Phoebe, who's put an enormous amount of effort in here, has dropped a survey in the chat. It's the last thing. First things on the survey is this meditation book that is definitely going to be useful to have around for the next few months. So Meditations for Mortals by the great author Oliver Burkeman. We promise you will enjoy it. We will select 20 people this week. We will send it to you. Just make a note, please. Make a note in that survey as well. On Thursday, I don't even get a picture in here, but I will be joining Nicole and Sasha to do a strategy showcase to talk about tools, technology, and tactics for fundraising success in uncertain times. We will focus on the FreeWill tools here, so I'll just be clear about that, and how charities are using them, what tactics they're employing. Nicole and Sasha are such a blessing to FreeWill. So Nicole spent, I think, 14 years in planned giving, eventually leading planned giving at the Make-A-Wish national organizations. She has a wealth of expertise. Sasha was a frontline fundraiser at Harvard University, major college in Boston, if you haven't heard of it, before working at Salesforce, working with nonprofits, and now is leading a ton of our work around grant assistant. Sasha is a great expert in a range of things. Nicole is unbelievably wonderful as well. And so we hope you enjoy this as well. Molly says, where do we enter our address to win the book? So Molly, in the chat, if you go to the chat now, there should be a link and a note from Phoebe that says, thanks for spending time with us. Please fill out this survey. This survey isn't just for the book, by the way. It's to give us feedback and to understand what it is. Jennifer says her son is a wish recipient in Connecticut. A lot of people say, woohoo, make a wish. So great points there. Casey says, is there a way to get that Chronicle article? We will send you a link to that as well. Okay, second thing, in our follow-up email, we would love your help. We are currently putting together a 2025 donor advised fund report. We are excited to kick it off. It's the 3rd report. The last 2 reports, people told us they were so helpful. So what it takes is 2 minutes of your time, hours and hours and hours of our time to filter it all together. We're obviously anonymizing all of your responses, so please don't stress about that. And then we will use it to help guide the whole industry forward. So please take a moment to do this. If you don't mind, in the follow-up email, you'll get a survey for this. It takes 5 to 8 minutes. It takes less if you're fast, or someone on your team might be better suited to do it. So that is that. Next steps, April 22nd, we're gonna go do a deep dive on how to raise large gifts from older donors in 2025. And then, of course, you can always reach me at patrick@freewill.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you are interested. But we love hearing from you. It's it's just always try to be here to help as much as we possibly can. And we'll go from there. So let me get to a couple of questions. And then we'll wrap up. So first question from Lynn says, the Smart Giving Suite promotes gifts of stock as a tax smart way to give. How do nonprofits talk about this amidst the market volatility? Do we even talk about it? So we talked about this a little bit in the webinar, and in fairness to Len, he might have asked this before we got to those slides. So yes, ask. Remember, the markets are up over the 2-year, over the 5-year horizon, even over the 1-year horizon as of the time we started this webinar. Don't know what's happened in the hours since. But people are looking for savvier ways to give. And with giving stock, you can have more impact for less money. So it's absolutely critical you keep doing this. Really, really important. But talk about it as a smarter way to give, a way to save more, right? Those are really important. Stacy, what's the source for the numbers in the bar graph in 08 and 09? Those are from Giving USA reports. So thank you so much for that question. And then similar question, do those charts reflect percentage and total dollar amounts? Yes, so much. Laura, why do we think foundations dropped so much in the 08 recession? It is a good question. I'll have to look into it. Good question. Meredith, how do you find out who has a DAF? It's almost impossible. Not true. It's not impossible. The way you get DAF gifts is you ask for them. The folks who are your wealthy donors are much more likely to have donor advised funds. You want to make it a point to ask in emails. You want to make it a point to ask on your website. And you want to talk about it in one-on-one conversations with major donors. Once you know, you've now locked that person in for 10 years of knowing, and you can have conversations about their grant. People who give you money out of their donor advised fund will give you more than if they were going to give you cash. So great question as well. More good questions. Is there a ceiling on the percentage of that foundations can pay out? No, there's a floor, Maureen. Maureen asks, 5% floor minimum, no ceiling. You can pay out your whole foundation in a year. Great questions. PJ says, during downturns, a lot of financial advisors use a strategy called tax loss harvesting. How can we appeal to the investors who are facing such a dilemma? Now, look, there's no benefit of giving depreciated assets. In fact, there's a cost to it. So I honestly wouldn't focus on this. I think it's a good thing to know about, but I wouldn't worry about it. Again, these are only stocks bought in the last year will have losses, not obviously entirely, but on average. So good question. Emily says, but there's no floor for DAFs. Emily, that is true. There is no floor for DAFs, but people have been very aggressive at giving out of DAFs. And DAF payout rates tends to be between 20 and 30%, as opposed to the 5 to 10% of private foundations. So I wouldn't worry about people. There's this whole hullabaloo about people hoarding money in DAFs. It's actually more true of private foundations, right? But now private foundations are giving out more, but people in DAFs are giving out a lot as well. So great questions. All right, we're going to pause there. It's 11:50. Excuse me. It's 12:55 on the East Coast, 11:55 Central, 9:55 in the Pacific area, Pacific time zone, 6:55 in Central Europe, where some of you are. And I think it's 6 or 7 p.m. in East Africa, but I don't know for sure, so I apologize for that. Look, before we wrap up, I just want to say 2 things. One, again, shout out to the FreeWill team, or not me, for all the hard work putting this together, which isn't just putting the slides together, right? There's a lot of work around getting the text set up, getting the invites out, getting the landing pages, making sure you are welcome, that we have enough, that we have enough sort of Zoom seats so you make everyone fit and you don't get kicked off. So big thank you to you all, plus big thank you to the strategists who are working with our partners through this. As always, a little bit more challenging. And then just as much, a big thank you to you for coming, spending an hour with us. And then a big thank you for all the work you're going to do over the next 10 months this year. I mean, it's not hyperbole. I'm not trying to be nice to you when I say this is the most important year for nonprofit fundraisers. I just actually believe it. I think it is. So anything we can do to help, let us know. And by the way, we're going to get through this. So hopefully you have some nice time in the sunshine. Hopefully, for the folks who care about these things, the Detroit Tigers keep winning, or your baseball team keeps winning, or you enjoyed March Madness, and your grandkids are doing well. We're going to get through this despite some challenging times, and we look forward to spending a lot more time together over the next few weeks and months. So take care, and talk to you all soon.